Farming Simulator 25, also known as Farming Glitchilator or Bug Simulator, is here. And let's just say it's not exactly plowing ahead as fans had hoped. Broken mechanics, AI workers that act like they've never seen a tractor before, and features so innovative they somehow went backwards. But is it really that bad, or are we just bad at farming? Stick around as we dig up the truth, because someone has to. Let's begin with the most glaring issue: technical problems. Farming Simulator 25 has been plagued with bugs and glitches since its release, leaving many players frustrated and disappointed. One of the most common complaints is the frequent appearance of graphical artifacts. Imagine driving your tractor across a picturesque field, only to be met with flashing, distorted visuals that completely break your immersion. These aren't minor hiccups. They are consistent enough to ruin the overall experience. Textures are another major issue. Players have reported that textures in the game can randomly disappear, turning what should be a lush farming environment into a bizarre, empty void. Whether it's crops vanishing from fields or entire buildings failing to load properly, these problems make it hard to stay engaged. And it doesn't stop there. The bugs extend to core gameplay mechanics, like the contract system. Contracts are essential in Farming Simulator, providing a way for players to earn money by completing tasks for NPCs. But in Farming Simulator 25, many players have found that even after fulfilling the requirements of a contract, such as harvesting a specific field or delivering a load of goods, the game simply doesn't recognize their work. This leaves them unable to complete the task or receive the promised rewards, effectively halting their progress. These technical flaws aren't just annoying, they undermine the trust players have in the game's quality control. For a franchise with such a devoted fan base, releasing a product with so many glaring issues feels like a betrayal. Many have questioned whether the game was rushed to market without proper testing, and this has left a bitter taste in the mouths of longtime players. Farming Simulator has always been about attention to detail, and with FS25, those details feel neglected. One of the most frustrating aspects of Farming Simulator 25 is its poor optimization, which has left even players with top-of-the-line gaming PCs scratching their heads. Farming Simulator has never been known for being a graphically demanding series. The visual improvements over the years have been incremental, not revolutionary, so it's reasonable to expect the game to run smoothly on modern hardware. Unfortunately, that's not the case with FS25. Imagine investing in a high-performance gaming rig with the latest processors, cutting-edge GPUs, and lightning-fast SSDs, only to have a game like FS25 struggle to maintain a stable frame rate. Reports from players indicate significant frame drops, stuttering during gameplay, and random freezes, even on hardware, far exceeding the recommended system requirements. Even more frustrating is that many of the new features introduced in Farming Simulator 25 have been available in other games for several years, making them feel outdated rather than innovative. Additionally, the game's graphical fidelity has been unfavorably compared to Grand Theft Auto V, a title released in 2013. While GTA V was groundbreaking for its time, FS25 struggles to match that level of visual quality more than a decade later. For a modern game, this raises serious questions about whether it's utilizing current hardware capabilities effectively or if the underlying engine is simply outdated. What makes this issue particularly baffling is that the graphical fidelity of FS25 hasn't drastically improved compared to its predecessor, FS22. While the environments may appear slightly more detailed and lighting effects have received minor upgrades, these changes don't justify the dramatic decrease in performance. The game doesn't feel like it's pushing the boundaries of modern technology, so why does it run so poorly? Let's talk specifics. Players have reported that when performing resource-intensive tasks like harvesting large fields, operating multiple vehicles, or even playing in multiplayer mode, the game often becomes unplayable due to severe lag. For a simulation game, where precision and timing are critical, these performance issues aren't just an inconvenience, they fundamentally break the gameplay experience. Worse still, the problems aren't limited to high-end rigs. Players with mid-range and budget systems, who typically lower graphical settings to achieve smooth performance, are reporting that even with everything set to low, the game struggles to maintain a consistent experience. This lack of scalability is a major oversight, especially for a game that should cater to a broad audience. So, what's causing these issues? Some have speculated that poor optimization during development is to blame. Others suggest that the game's new engine, or the modifications made to the existing one, may be riddled with inefficiencies. Whatever the reason, it's clear that Farming Simulator 25 was not ready for release from a technical standpoint. Players expect better from a series that has been around for over a decade. In comparison, FS22 offered a much smoother experience on similar hardware, proving that the developers know how to optimize their games when given the time and resources. For FS25, however, it seems like corners were cut, leaving players to deal with the fallout. This is especially disappointing for longtime fans of the series, who have come to expect reliability and polish. Performance issues like these aren't just a technical problem, they erode trust in the brand. Gamers invest their money and time expecting a polished product, and when those expectations aren't met, it's hard to justify sticking around for future installments. If Giant Software hopes to retain their loyal fan base, addressing these performance problems must be a top priority. Few things are more frustrating for gamers than not being able to play the game they've just purchased. Unfortunately, for many players, this is exactly what they experience with Farming Simulator 25. Crashes and startup issues have been among the most reported problems since the game's release. And they're not just occasional, they're persistent and widespread. Imagine the scenario. You've waited months for the game's launch, pre-ordered it, and downloaded it as soon as it became available. You eagerly click play on your platform of choice, ready to immerse yourself in the world of farming, and then nothing happens. Maybe the game loads for a second, showing the logo, only to crash back to the desktop without any error message. Or worse, it freezes mid-load, forcing you to restart your system. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a complete roadblock. For some players, the issue is even more perplexing. The game runs fine for a few minutes, maybe even an hour, and then crashes unexpectedly during gameplay. This not only interrupts the flow of the game, but can also lead to lost progress, especially if you forget to save. And in a game like Farming Simulator, where meticulous planning and execution are key, losing progress due to crashes can be devastating. So, what's causing these crashes? While the developers have remained relatively silent on the root of the problem, players and community forums have pointed to several possible culprits. Some suggest it's a compatibility issue with certain hardware configurations. Others believe the game's engine struggles to handle specific scenarios, such as loading large maps, running mods, or even playing in multiplayer mode. Whatever the reason, it's clear that proper testing and optimization were lacking. The problem isn't limited to PC players either. Console users have reported similar issues, with the game failing to launch or crashing during critical moments. For a franchise that prides itself on cross-platform support, this level of instability is particularly disappointing. Farming Simulator has always been about accessibility, giving players from all platforms the chance to enjoy the same experience. But with FS25, it feels like the developers dropped the ball. The crashes also extend to mod support, a feature that has always been a cornerstone of the series. While mods are supposed to enhance gameplay, in FS25, they often exacerbate the instability. Many players have reported that installing even a single mod can lead to frequent crashes, forcing them to play the game in its unmodded and often less engaging state. What makes this even more frustrating is the lack of clear communication from the developers. While some patches and updates have been released, they've been slow to address these critical issues, leaving players to figure out workarounds on their own. And let's be honest, most gamers aren't interested in diving into forums, troubleshooting files, or experimenting with settings just to get a game to work. For a full-price title from a well-established series, these problems are inexcusable. Players expect a polished experience, especially for a franchise that has had years to refine its formula. Farming Simulator 25's crashes and startup issues don't just inconvenience players, they undermine their trust in the brand. If Giant Software wants to keep their loyal fan base, they need to address these problems quickly and transparently. Stability isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Players shouldn't have to fight their own game just to play it. Giant Software must prioritize fixing these issues if they want to restore faith in the series. After all, a game is only as good as its ability to be played. When a new installment in a beloved series is announced, Players expect one thing above all else: innovation. They want to see exciting new features that justify the purchase and elevate the experience beyond what previous games offered. Unfortunately, Farming Simulator 25 has left many fans feeling underwhelmed in this regard. Instead of being the leap forward the series desperately needed, it feels like a rehash of old ideas, with some of the best features even missing entirely. Let's start with the machinery roster. One of the franchise's greatest strengths has always been its impressive selection of real-world farming equipment, faithfully recreated with stunning detail. Fans love exploring the catalogs of tractors, harvesters, and attachments, finding the perfect tools for their operations. But in Farming Simulator 25, players were shocked to discover that the roster of available machinery has actually been reduced compared to Farming Simulator 22. This isn't just disappointing, it feels like a step backward. One particularly glaring omission is the absence of a bale shredder. In previous installments, this tool was essential for breaking down bales into loose material to feed animals like sheep. Without it, players are left unable to properly feed their sheep as the animals refuse to eat whole bales. This seemingly small oversight creates significant challenges for those focusing on livestock farming, forcing players to resort to workarounds or abandon sheep farming entirely. For a game that prides itself on realism and completeness, this missing piece of equipment feels like a major oversight. Popular brands and models that players relied on in FS22 are nowhere to be found in FS25. And while the developers did add a few new machines, the additions don't come close to making up for what was removed. For a game that prides itself on authenticity and variety, this reduction is hard to overlook. Fans have expressed frustration, asking why a game that claims to offer more actually delivers less in one of its most critical areas. But it doesn't stop there. Farming Simulator 25 also fails to include some of the groundbreaking features introduced in previous games, such as precision farming. For those unfamiliar, precision farming was a fan-favorite system that allowed players to manage their fields with unprecedented accuracy, using data-driven tools to optimize yields while reducing costs. This feature brought a level of realism and depth that truly elevated the gameplay, and its absence in FS25 is a major letdown. Even smaller, quality-of-life improvements from FS22 seem to be missing. For example, the expanded crop types, customizable field shapes, and advanced soil management tools that players grew to love have either been scaled back or removed entirely. These were features that added complexity and variety to farming, making each playthrough unique. Without them, FS25 feels shallow in comparison. Then there's the issue of new content, or the lack thereof. While the game does introduce a few minor additions, like new maps and a handful of updated mechanics, they don't feel significant enough to justify the hype or the price tag. The new maps, while visually appealing, don't bring anything fundamentally different to the gameplay. They're just more of the same, dressed up in slightly different aesthetics. For a series as established as Farming Simulator, players expect innovation not just in appearance, but in substance. What makes this lack of innovation even more disappointing is the fact that Farming Simulator 25 was marketed as the most advanced entry yet. Trailers and promotional material promised a revolution in virtual farming, with cutting-edge mechanics and immersive new experiences. But when players finally got their hands on the game, many felt that these promises were empty. The gameplay loop remains largely unchanged, and the so-called new features are either underwhelming or poorly executed. This has led to a broader question within the community. Was Farming Simulator 25 rushed to market? With only a few years between FS22 and FS25, some players speculate that the developers simply didn't have enough time to fully innovate or expand upon the series. Instead of delivering a polished, feature-rich game, they may have settled for a safe, incremental update disguised as a major release. For a franchise that has been around for over a decade, this lack of meaningful innovation is a serious problem. Longtime fans are beginning to question whether the series has stagnated, and many are calling on the developers to take a step back and reevaluate their priorities. After all, Farming Simulator isn't just a game, it's a platform for creativity, strategy, and relaxation. Players want to feel like they're progressing with each new installment, not regressing. In the end, Farming Simulator 25 feels less like a bold step forward and more like a missed opportunity. By failing to innovate where it counts and removing features that players loved, it has left even the most loyal fans questioning the direction of the series. If the developers want to win back the trust of their audience, they'll need to do more than just promise improvements. They'll need to deliver them. One of the biggest frustrations in Farming Simulator 25 is the poorly designed AI workers, which feel like a significant downgrade compared to previous games. AI workers are meant to be your assistants, taking over repetitive tasks like plowing fields, sowing crops, or transporting goods so that you can focus on the bigger picture. In a well-designed system, they streamline operations and make large-scale farming more manageable. But in FS25, the AI does the exact opposite. Let's start with the basics: pathfinding. In any farming simulator, AI workers need to navigate complex environments, fields, roads, and the occasional obstacle like trees or buildings. In FS25, however, the AI seems completely incapable of handling even the simplest tasks. For instance, assigning a worker to plow a straightforward field often results in them getting stuck, circling endlessly, or stopping entirely for no apparent reason. This isn't an isolated issue. It happens frequently, disrupting the flow of gameplay and forcing players to intervene constantly. One of the most baffling problems is the AI's inability to detect and avoid obstacles. Imagine assigning a worker to harvest a large field while you focus on another task, only to return and find them hopelessly wedged against a tree, a fence, or even another piece of equipment. Instead of being helpful, these workers become a liability, wasting time and resources. And it's not just large obstacles they struggle with. Sometimes even a slight unevenness in the terrain is enough to throw them off course. These issues are particularly frustrating because Farming Simulator 25 had an opportunity to build on the improvements made in previous games. In FS22, while the AI wasn't perfect, it was functional enough to handle most tasks with minimal supervision. Players could trust workers to complete contracts or maintain fields without constant micromanagement. In FS25, that trust is gone. Instead, players are forced to babysit their AI workers, negating the entire purpose of having them in the first place. Let's not forget the costs associated with hiring AI workers. In FS25, hiring a worker comes with a financial penalty, as it should. It's meant to simulate the cost of labor on a real farm. But when the workers perform so poorly, it feels like you're being charged for nothing. This creates a dilemma for players. Do you waste time doing everything yourself? Or do you waste money on workers who might not even finish the job? The AI's incompetence doesn't just impact solo players, it's a huge problem in multiplayer as well. Farming Simulator's multiplayer mode is designed to let groups of players manage a farm collaboratively. But in FS25, many teams find themselves abandoning AI workers altogether, as their unreliability disrupts coordinated efforts. This forces human players to take on every task manually, which can quickly become exhausting and repetitive. Players have also reported issues with AI workers in specific scenarios, such as transporting goods. Assigning a worker to drive a load of harvested crops to the market should be a straightforward task. Yet, in FS25, workers often get lost, take the longest possible route, or stop halfway without explanation. This not only wastes time, but also disrupts the flow of production, as your equipment and vehicles are tied up in these endless errors. So, why is the AI so broken in FS25? Some speculate that it's a result of rushed development, with insufficient time dedicated to refining and testing the system. Others believe the game's updated engine may have introduced new bugs that were never properly resolved. Whatever the reason, it's clear that Giant Software dropped the ball here. The Farming Simulator series has always been about creating an authentic and satisfying farming experience, but the AI in FS25 takes players out of that immersion, replacing realism with frustration. The community has been vocal about these problems, and while patches and updates have been promised, the damage to the game's reputation is already done. For many players, the AI is one of the most critical aspects of the game, and its failure to perform in FS25 is a deal-breaker. If Farming Simulator 25 wants to regain the trust of its fan base, fixing the AI needs to be a top priority. Automation is supposed to enhance gameplay, not hinder it. Until this issue is resolved, players will continue to feel that their hard-earned money was wasted on a game that doesn't meet their expectations. In simulation games, the world around you should feel vibrant and alive, immersing you in an experience that feels more than just functional. Farming Simulator 25, unfortunately, fails to deliver in this regard. Despite claims of improved environments and more interactive NPCs, the game world remains one of the most lifeless elements of the entire experience. Let's break this down. Farming Simulator 25 introduced NPCs, presumably to make the game world feel more inhabited. You'll find characters scattered across towns, occasionally walking around or standing by buildings, but their behavior is basic at best and completely static at worst. These NPCs don't react to your presence, don't have meaningful interactions, and, most importantly, don't contribute to the immersion of running a bustling, interconnected farming community. In many ways, these NPCs feel like an afterthought, window dressing meant to suggest a living world without actually creating one. They wander aimlessly or stand motionless, repeating the same limited animations. There's no variation, no personality, and no sense of purpose. They're essentially props, and their presence does little to alleviate the overwhelming sense of emptiness in the game world. Let's consider the town centers and markets, areas that should logically be vibrant hubs of activity in a farming simulation. You'd expect to see farmers unloading goods, merchants haggling, or townspeople going about their daily lives. But in Farming Simulator 25, these spaces feel eerily abandoned. The lack of dynamic interactions or ambient activity leaves these locations feeling hollow and disconnected from the core gameplay. Another missed opportunity lies in the interaction between players and NPCs. Imagine being able to form partnerships, negotiate contracts directly with characters, or even participate in local events like fairs or festivals. These features would have added depth and personality to the world. Instead, the NPCs in FS25 serve no real purpose beyond filling space, and even then, they fail to do so convincingly. The lack of life extends beyond the towns to the fields and countryside. Farming Simulator 25's maps are vast and often beautiful, with sweeping landscapes and picturesque sunsets. But beauty alone isn't enough to create immersion. The absence of dynamic wildlife, varied weather effects, and environmental interactions makes these maps feel sterile. Imagine driving your tractor through a forest and hearing birds chirping, seeing deer cross your path, or watching clouds roll in before a storm. These small touches could have transformed the environment into something truly memorable. Instead, what we get is a static, unchanging backdrop that feels more like a stage than a living world. Dynamic world building isn't just about aesthetics, it's about creating a sense of purpose. Players want to feel like their actions matter, like the world evolves in response to their decisions. But in FS25, there's little to no feedback from the environment. Whether you cultivate a massive field or neglect it entirely, the surrounding world stays exactly the same. There's no sense of progression, no sign that your farm is part of a larger ecosystem. Even the addition of new maps in FS25 doesn't solve this problem. While each map offers a unique layout and setting, they all suffer from the same lack of dynamism. Whether you're farming in a European valley or a rural American town, the experience is largely the same: static, repetitive, and uninspired. This issue is particularly frustrating because Farming Simulator 25 had the potential to deliver a truly immersive world. Previous entries in the series laid a solid foundation, and many fans hoped FS25 would build upon it with more interactive elements, vibrant NPCs, and dynamic environments. Instead, it feels like the developers took a step back, offering a world that looks good on the surface, but lacks any real depth or soul. And it's not just longtime fans who are disappointed. Newcomers to the series, drawn in by the promise of a rich farming experience, have expressed similar frustrations. Many expected a game where the world felt alive and reactive, a place where they could lose themselves in the joys and challenges of virtual farming. What they found instead was a world that feels like a chore, devoid of the personality and excitement that makes simulation games so rewarding. At the end of the day, a simulation game is only as good as the world it creates. Farming Simulator 25 has the framework of a great game, but its empty, lifeless world prevents it from reaching its full potential. If Giant Software wants to breathe new life into the series, they'll need to focus on creating a world that feels dynamic, interactive, and alive. A world where players can truly feel at home. Multiplayer has always been a cherished feature of the Farming Simulator series, allowing players to farm cooperatively, share tasks, and create massive, thriving farms together. It's one of the key ways that players connect and share the farming experience with friends or other enthusiasts. But in Farming Simulator 25, the multiplayer experience is anything but smooth. One of the most common complaints from players is the game's tendency to freeze at 99% during the loading process. Imagine gathering your friends for a session, spending time coordinating who will manage which tasks, only to be stuck on a loading screen indefinitely. This isn't a rare occurrence. It's a widespread issue that has left many multiplayer sessions unplayable. Worse, there's no clear way to fix it, leaving players frustrated and alienated. Even when players do manage to load into a multiplayer session, the problems don't end there. The game struggles with lag and synchronization issues, especially when multiple players are working on different tasks simultaneously. Actions like harvesting, transporting goods, or even using tools can cause significant delays, making it difficult to maintain the smooth coordination required for cooperative farming. One particularly baffling issue that has emerged involves the use of terrain tools in multiplayer mode, especially the round brush tool for painting terrain. In Farming Simulator 25, players can use this tool to customize their farms by painting surfaces like asphalt or grass. But here's the catch. Using the round brush in multiplayer mode can cause severe lag spikes for everyone in the session, making the game almost unplayable. This issue isn't just a minor annoyance, it's a game-breaking problem for players who want to customize their farms together. Imagine trying to add a simple asphalt road to your farm, only for the game to freeze or slow down to the point where tasks can't be completed. What's worse is that this lag isn't localized. It affects everyone in the session, even those not directly using the tool. The impact of these technical flaws goes beyond mere frustration. For players who rely on multiplayer sessions as a core part of their gameplay experience, these issues fundamentally break the game. Farming Simulator is supposed to be a collaborative experience, one that allows players to share in the joys and challenges of running a farm. But in FS25, the multiplayer mode feels more like a series of technical hurdles than a seamless experience. So why is multiplayer so broken in FS25? Some players speculate that it's tied to poor optimization of the game engine, which struggles to handle the demands of real-time collaboration between players. Others point to specific coding issues, like the aforementioned round brush lag, as evidence of rushed development and insufficient testing. Whatever the root cause, one thing is clear. The multiplayer mode in FS25 was not ready for release. The developers have acknowledged some of these issues, but progress has been slow. Patches have addressed minor bugs, but the core problems, such as freezing at 99% and game-breaking lag during terrain customization, remain largely unresolved. For a series that has always emphasized community and teamwork, these multiplayer flaws are a significant setback. Beyond the technical issues, the lack of innovation in the multiplayer experience has also left players disappointed. Many were hoping for expanded features, like shared contracts, dynamic events, or even the ability to interact with NPCs as a group. Instead, FS25 delivers the same basic multiplayer functionality as its predecessors, only this time riddled with bugs and performance issues. At its best, multiplayer should enhance the Farming Simulator experience, allowing players to collaborate, strategize, and build something greater than they could alone. But in FS25, it feels like an afterthought, a feature that's technically present but far from functional. Until these issues are addressed, players looking to farm with friends will likely find themselves disappointed. Multiplayer is supposed to bring people together, but in Farming Simulator 25, it's driving them apart. If Giant Software wants to restore the community's trust, they'll need to not only fix these issues, but also rethink what multiplayer can and should be for the future of the series. For many gamers, The choice of input device is a deeply personal preference. Some prefer the precision of a keyboard and mouse, while others find the comfort and familiarity of a controller to be ideal for long play sessions. Farming Simulator has historically been celebrated for accommodating both styles, providing seamless controller integration that made farming on the couch just as enjoyable as farming at a desk. Unfortunately, Farming Simulator 25 has taken a significant step backward in this regard, leaving players frustrated and alienated. Let's start with the basics. Farming Simulator 25 claims to support a variety of controllers, from standard gamepads like the Xbox and PlayStation controllers, to more specialized equipment like steering wheels and joysticks for enhanced immersion. However, players have reported widespread issues with controllers failing to work correctly. For some, the game doesn't recognize their controller at all, forcing them to navigate the menus and play the game with a keyboard and mouse, even if they're on a console where the controller is the primary input method. Even when the game does recognize a controller, the problems don't end there. Many players have reported that the default button mappings are nonsensical, making basic actions like accelerating a tractor, attaching implements, or opening menus more complicated than they should be. Reconfiguring the controls, which should be a simple fix, is often buggy and unreliable. Some players have found that changes they make in the settings don't save, forcing them to remap their controls every time they launch the game. One of the most baffling issues involves specialized farming controllers, such as Logitech's Heavy Equipment Bundle, which is specifically designed for farming simulator games. In FS22, these devices offered an unparalleled level of immersion, allowing players to use physical levers, pedals, and buttons to control their equipment, just like real farmers. In FS25, however, many of these devices either don't work at all or function inconsistently. Players report that certain buttons fail to register, or that the game only recognizes part of the input, rendering the expensive hardware virtually useless. For those who invested in this specialized hardware, the experience has been nothing short of infuriating. These devices aren't cheap. They're marketed as premium tools for serious farming simulator fans. The fact that FS25 fails to support them properly feels like a betrayal of the game's most dedicated players. The issue extends beyond hardware to gameplay functionality. In Farming Simulator 25, many actions require precise timing or complex sequences of inputs. For example, attaching a trailer to a tractor, operating a combine harvester, or loading bales of hay onto a trailer often involves multiple steps. On a keyboard and mouse, these actions are straightforward, as players can quickly access a wide range of inputs. On a controller, however, the limited number of buttons means that these actions are often mapped to awkward combinations or require constant toggling between menus, slowing down gameplay and breaking immersion. This isn't just a matter of inconvenience, it fundamentally affects the way the game is played. Farming Simulator is meant to be a relaxing experience, where players can lose themselves in the rhythm of farm life. But when basic actions become frustratingly complex, that sense of relaxation disappears. For many players, FS25's controller issues have turned a soothing pastime into a source of stress. So, what went wrong? Some players speculate that the developers rushed the implementation of controller support, focusing instead on other areas of the game. Others believe that the introduction of new mechanics and changes to the control system may have created compatibility issues that weren't fully tested before release. Whatever the cause, it's clear that controller users were an afterthought in the development process. Despite these problems, there is hope. Players have been vocal about their frustrations, and the developers have acknowledged the issues in their patch notes. Promises of improved controller support have been made, but progress has been slow. In the meantime, many players are left waiting for fixes that may or may not come. Controller support isn't just a feature, it's a necessity for many players. Whether you're gaming on a console, relaxing with a controller on PC, or using specialized equipment for a more immersive experience, you deserve a game that works as advertised. Until Farming Simulator 25 resolves these issues, it will continue to alienate a significant portion of its audience. The user interface is the bridge between the player and the game. A well-designed UI should feel intuitive, efficient, and customizable, adapting seamlessly to the needs of the player. Unfortunately, in Farming Simulator 25, the user interface feels like a significant downgrade, adding unnecessary complexity to what should be straightforward gameplay. Let's start with the HUD, heads-up display, the on-screen elements that provide crucial information like money, fuel levels, and equipment stats. In Farming Simulator 25, the HUD is cluttered and poorly scaled, making it difficult to read on certain screen sizes or resolutions. Players on smaller monitors or televisions have reported that vital information is almost impossible to discern, while those with larger screens find the HUD overly intrusive, taking up too much space and obstructing their view of the game world. Worse, there is no option to resize or customize the HUD, leaving players stuck with its default configuration. This lack of flexibility is particularly disappointing given the game's focus on precision and detail. In a title where players need to monitor multiple variables, like crop growth stages, market prices, and vehicle conditions, a poorly designed HUD isn't just an inconvenience, it actively hampers gameplay. Then there's the issue of menu navigation. Farming Simulator 25 features a complex network of menus for managing everything from finances to equipment. While complexity is to be expected in a simulation game, FS25's menu system feels unnecessarily convoluted. Tasks that were simple in previous games, like checking your inventory or adjusting field settings, now require navigating through multiple layers of poorly labeled menus. For example, the Vehicle Shop menu, a staple of the series, has become a source of frustration. In FS25, players have reported that finding and purchasing equipment takes significantly longer due to disorganized categories and unresponsive controls. Searching for specific tools, like a particular type of harvester or trailer, often feels like hunting for a needle in a haystack. This inefficiency disrupts the flow of gameplay, forcing players to spend more time in menus and less time actually farming. The map interface, another critical tool, has also drawn criticism. Players rely on the map to track their vehicles, monitor field conditions, and plan routes. However, in FS25, the map feels sluggish and unintuitive. Icons overlap, making it hard to distinguish between different elements, and the lack of clear labels often leaves players guessing. Simple actions, like setting a waypoint or switching between layers, require more clicks and effort than they should, slowing down the pace of the game. Another glaring issue is the game's lack of accessibility options for the interface. Simulation games attract a diverse audience, including players with varying levels of experience and different physical or visual needs. Yet FS25 fails to offer basic features like font size adjustment, colorblind modes, or even an option to simplify the interface for new players. This oversight alienates a portion of the player base and makes the game less inclusive overall. One of the most baffling design choices involves notifications and alerts. In FS25, important alerts, like low fuel warnings or crop growth updates, often appear as small, easily overlooked text boxes. Conversely, less critical messages, like reminders about daily upkeep costs, can dominate the screen, interrupting gameplay at the worst possible moments. This imbalance makes it difficult for players to prioritize tasks effectively, leading to unnecessary confusion and frustration. These interface issues extend to multiplayer mode as well. Coordinating tasks with other players requires constant communication, but the lack of intuitive UI tools makes this unnecessarily challenging. For example, there's no easy way to assign specific tasks or vehicles to teammates, forcing players to rely on external communication methods like voice chat. A well-designed interface could have streamlined this process, enhancing the cooperative experience rather than complicating it. So, why does the interface feel so poorly designed? Some players speculate that it's the result of a rushed development cycle, with insufficient time dedicated to refining the user experience. Others point to a disconnect between the developers and the community, suggesting that feedback from previous games wasn't adequately considered during FS25's development. Whatever the reason, the result is an interface that feels more like an obstacle than a tool. Despite these challenges, there is potential for improvement. Players have been vocal about their frustrations, and UI updates are among the most commonly requested fixes. Developers have the opportunity to address these issues through patches and updates, implementing features like HUD scaling, better menu organization, and enhanced accessibility options. In the end, a good interface should fade into the background, allowing players to focus on the experience itself. Farming Simulator 25's interface, however, does the opposite. It demands attention, often for the wrong reasons. If Giant Software wants to deliver on the series' promise of an immersive and relaxing farming experience, they'll need to overhaul the UI to meet the needs of their players. Animal husbandry has always been a vital and rewarding aspect of the Farming Simulator series, offering players the chance to raise livestock, produce goods, and bring their farms to life. From feeding and watering animals to selling milk, wool, and eggs, it's a system that adds depth and realism to the game. However, in Farming Simulator 25, animal husbandry is plagued with issues that make it less enjoyable and, at times, downright frustrating. One of the most glaring problems is the issue with pasture grass. In previous games, grass on animal pastures would naturally regrow, simulating the continuous grazing of livestock. This mechanic allowed players to maintain a steady supply of grass for animals like cows and sheep without constant intervention. But in FS25, players have discovered that grass on pastures simply doesn't regrow as it should. After a few days of grazing, the pasture becomes barren, leaving players scrambling to find alternative food sources for their livestock. This issue isn't just a minor annoyance. It completely disrupts the cycle of animal care. Players who rely on pasture grass as a primary food source are forced to demolish and rebuild their pastures to restore the grass, a process that is both time-consuming and expensive. Not only does this break immersion, but it also feels like a step backward in gameplay mechanics. Instead of focusing on the joys of managing livestock, players are stuck performing tedious and repetitive tasks to fix a problem that shouldn't exist in the first place. The lack of regrowth also creates logistical challenges. Grass silage and hay are essential for producing total mixed ration, TMR, a high-quality feed necessary for maximizing milk production in cows. Without access to pasture grass, players must dedicate entire fields to grass crops, adding additional pressure to an already demanding farming schedule. This forces players to make tough choices about resource allocation, often at the expense of other aspects of their farms. For players managing larger farms, this issue becomes even more problematic. Feeding a large herd of cows or flock of sheep requires significant amounts of grass and hay. Without functional pastures, players are left with no choice but to constantly mow, bale, and transport grass from distant fields, tasks that are time-consuming and detract from other farming activities. Another common complaint involves animal health and productivity. In Farming Simulator 25, livestock productivity is tied directly to their health and happiness, which depends on factors like food quality, cleanliness, and living conditions. However, many players have reported that even when all these conditions are met, animal productivity remains inconsistent or lower than expected. For example, cows may produce less milk, or sheep may fail to produce enough wool, despite being well-fed and kept in clean, spacious pastures. This inconsistency makes it difficult for players to plan their farm's economy. Livestock should be a reliable source of income, but in FS25, the unpredictability of animal productivity often leaves players questioning whether the effort is worth it. For new players, this lack of clear feedback can be especially discouraging, as it's hard to tell whether the issue lies with their management or with the game itself. Even the process of expanding animal husbandry operations feels underwhelming. In previous games, players could invest in new facilities and upgrades, gradually growing their herds and flocks. But in FS25, the lack of meaningful upgrades and the persistent issues with pastures make expanding feel more like a chore than a rewarding milestone. So, what's causing these problems? Some players speculate that the pasture grass issue is a bug tied to the game's new terrain and landscaping mechanics. Others believe it's an oversight in the balancing of animal husbandry, with developers focusing more on crop mechanics than on livestock. Whatever the reason, these problems undermine one of the most engaging aspects of the game. While some players have found workarounds, such as manually repainting grass onto pastures using the landscaping tool, these solutions are far from ideal. They require additional time, money, and effort, and they break the immersive farming experience that the series is known for. Animal husbandry is about more than just mechanics. It's about creating a farm that feels alive, dynamic, and rewarding to manage. Until these issues are resolved, players will continue to feel let down by a system that has so much potential, but fails to deliver. Giant Software has an opportunity to address these problems and restore faith in this beloved feature, but the clock is ticking. Farming Simulator 25 could have been a game changer, a title that built upon the successes of its predecessors while introducing meaningful innovations to take the series to new heights. Instead, it has left fans disappointed, frustrated, and questioning the direction of the franchise. The backlash has been swift and widespread. Players across forums, social media, and review platforms have voiced their dissatisfaction, citing technical issues, a lack of new content, and poorly executed features. For a series that has historically thrived on community support, this level of criticism is both alarming and unprecedented. So, where did it all go wrong? The technical issues, from crashes and lag to broken mechanics like contracts and AI workers, have made the game nearly unplayable for some. Longtime fans expected polish and reliability, but instead, they were met with a product that feels incomplete, rushed, and poorly optimized. Beyond the bugs, the lack of innovation has left players feeling like FS25 is a step backward rather than forward. Key features, such as precision farming and a robust roster of machinery, are glaringly absent, while promised improvements to graphics and mechanics fail to live up to expectations. For many, Farming Simulator 25 feels like a missed opportunity, a game that promised so much but delivered so little. Players aren't just disappointed with the game itself, they're concerned about the future of the series. Will Giant Software listen to the feedback and make meaningful changes, or will this be the beginning of the end for the franchise? But there is hope. The Farming Simulator community has always been passionate, dedicated, and willing to give feedback to improve the game. If the developers take this criticism seriously and address the issues through patches and future updates, FS25 could still redeem itself. After all, the foundation of a great game is there. It just needs the care and attention it deserves. The question now is, where does Farming Simulator go from here? Will Giant Software rise to the occasion, listen to its loyal fan base, and deliver the game that players were promised? Or will this installment be remembered as a turning point for all the wrong reasons? The choice is theirs, and time is running out.